Good evening, everyone. My name is Joseph, and my other teammates are Rohini and Likit. Today, we are going to go through the README file that consists of all the steps that we have taken in creating a Java application in using Docker, Kubernetes, and setting up a CI/CD pipeline using Jenkins on AWS. And these are the task overview that we have used. The first one is creating and pushing a Docker image to Docker Hub, and setting up an EC2 instance for deploying the application on Kubernetes cluster, and installing and configuring Rancher, uh, create a creating a Kubernetes cluster and deploying the application, setting up another EC2 instance to install and run Jenkins, setting up an GitHub repository, creating and running a CI/CD pipeline. The first step is creating and pushing a Docker image, and this is the overview for the creating and pushing a Docker image. For that, we use the Docker Hub and Visual Studio Code, and make sure and Maven is used for building the Java project. And going through in detail, first step is installing Docker on the Mac, and make sure to sign in to Docker Hub. The second step is launch the Visual Studio Code and create a Docker file, and this is the script that we have used for creating a Docker file. The third step is creating a WAR file. For that, we have used Maven and run the following command. To get a proper directory, we use the Maven. Under the target, you can find the WAR file, and that's the Docker file that we have created. Okay. The first step is we need to build a Docker image. For that, open the terminal in the Visual Studio Code. For that, we have used Docker build command with the tag given latest. Okay, the Docker image is created. Now we need to create a Docker container. For that, we use the run command to create a Docker container, which maps the port 80 on your host to port 80 in the container. To verify it locally, place the following link in the browser, and this is the screenshot that we have taken. To make it public, we need to push the Docker image and the container to the Docker Hub. For that, first we need to log in into the account and give the password required, and when the login is successful, tag and push the Docker image that we have created using the following commands: Docker tag and Docker push. To verify it whether it is made public, go to the repository, and this is a screenshot that we have taken, and this is now public. You can verify it.
Hello everyone, this is Rohini. I'm going to walk you through the second step, that is setting up the EC2 instances for the Kubernetes clusters. This part of the assignment involves creating two instances. One for installing the Rancher, which is the instance EC2 instance master. The other one is for worker nodes for Kubernetes cluster. So, however, we are going to install Docker on both the instances. This is the critical step that we are going to do. And these two instances are for one is for Rancher, the other one is for the Kubernetes worker nodes. So for that, we need an account, AWS account, and we have to get access to the EC2 service, and we should have a key pair along for SSH access. So first of all, coming to the launching of EC2 instance, the procedure we followed is like: first we need to give the instance name, the EC2 instance name. Then we have chosen Ubuntu as our AMI image and configured it in this manner, and we have chosen T3 large for instance type and extracted key pair The name is SWS2. Then we have to check every checkbox here for ports, and we changed 8 GB to 30 GB and then launched the instance. So this is the instance that got created for us, and the name is master, on which we are going to configure Rancher. So after following these steps, I assigned elastic IP, because every time when the instance stops, the IP changes, which is not feasible with this process. So we have created elastic IP for this, and the process is go to elastic IPs and click on allocate elastic IPs, and make sure the network border group is near to Virginia, and then click on allocate. A random IP will be allocated. Then we have to associate this with the instance that we created. Click on associate and choose the instance, then click on associate, so that this IP will be associated with the EC2 instance, which is permanent, which doesn't change even if the instance stops. So this is the IP. After associating elastic IP with an instance, the second step is like modifying the security groups. As previously done, we have configured HTTP, SSH and HTTPS while creating an instance, but additionally we're gonna add the custom TCP with port 8080. Then third step is like connecting to the Docker. So for that we should connect to the EC2 instance by clicking on connect. So this is the instance that we're going to connect. Click on connect and make sure the username is Ubuntu, and click on connect again. It will connect you to the Ubuntu AMI. Then here we're going to install Docker, and the first command that we should give is sudo apt get update to update the packages. After it updates, again execute sudo apt install docker.io to install Docker on the instance. Allow it to continue, give Y. Then it will proceed with the installation of Docker on EC2 instance. We have seen these steps in the video. Then the fourth step is to launch and configure worker instance. Repeat the same steps that we followed for master instance, that we will be creating the EC2 instance for with the name cube worker, and allocate the elastic IP, configure the security group and install Docker on it as well, and then verify the instance status. We should verify both the instance status as running. This is for Rancher and this is for worker nodes. So this is the public DNS. We should copy this. We should copy this into a notepad that can be used later. And the third step that we followed is installing and configuring Rancher on AWS EC2 instance. So Rancher is an open source platform that simplifies management of Kubernetes cluster. So the prerequisites are like the instance master that we created earlier, Docker installed on it, and we have public IPv4 DNS address with us. So the steps are like, in the browser we have to open Rancher quick start page. Under start the server, copy this command and go to your EC2 instance master. Take that command and paste it here so that it will install Rancher. Docker is used to install Rancher container on the EC2 instance. Let it complete the installation. After Rancher is installed, the command will pull the Rancher Docker image and start Rancher container that listens to port 80 and 443. So this next step is verifying the installation. To verify that, we're gonna give sudo docker ps to see all the running containers. So we have Rancher running and up. So to access the Rancher UI, we have to copy the public IPv4 DNS URL from EC2 instance called master and paste it in the browser. We initially get the security warnings. Just click on advanced and click on the link here so that it will take you to the initial login page of the Rancher, where it gives the initial setup. In order to get the admin password to get started with, we should give this particular command on our EC2 instance so that we get a bootstrap password like this. So we should give the same password in this field and log in. Once you log in, it will prompt us to create our own user ID and passwords, and we should check this and click on continue. Once you click on continue, you will be getting a UI, the welcome page of Rancher with one cluster which is by default. Then we have to create and deploy the Kubernetes cluster using Rancher. So the next step is to create and deploy Kubernetes cluster using Rancher. So creating the Kubernetes cluster and deploying an application through Rancher UI describes as follows. The deployment involves setting up custom cluster, configuring nodes and deploying an application Docker container. Prerequisites are like, we should have a separate EC2 instance for worker nodes, then at least 2 EC2 instances of clusters. One is master and for with Rancher, and another one is for worker. Docker installed on both the participants. Then creating a cluster. So open the UI. Once you go to create, then you'll see an option called custom option. Click on that. Once you click on custom option, we can give any name to our cluster. We have given this name, and leave the other settings as is, and then click on create. Once you create it, you should go to the registration tab under cluster management. Then make sure we check all the three options here, the etcd control plane and worker. Then in the second step, we should copy this command to run it on our EC2 instance. So check this box so that we get a command for insecure mode. Then go to EC2 instance kube worker and then run this command on that kube worker instance. So after we paste the same command here and run it. After you run it, it is going to create a cluster. So wait for the cluster to turn from updating to active. So once cluster is active, we should click on explore and go to workloads and select deployments. We are going to create a deployment on the cluster to deploy an application. So we should keep the namespace as default and give any name here. I have given as to deployment as a name, and the replica should be 3. We have taken replicas as 3, and then leave container as is, and in image we should give the image that we created during Docker containerization along with the tag. This is the image that we gave, and we should configure the node port too. The service type that we given is node port, the name is HTTP, private container port is like 8080, and we refer to the Docker image here. Leave the other settings as is and click on create. So as shown before, like we configured the networking using node port as service type, the name, and the private container port as 8080. Wait until the status updating turns to active. So once deployment is created, we can access the application. So we should follow this process. Navigate to service tab within the deployment and click on the URL under node port, and we should append our var file name at the end to access the application. And the process is, click on the deployment created, go to services tab and click on the link. In the end, we should append our var file name. So in the end, we have appended our var file name here to access the application. Our next step is to work with Jenkins. For that, we need the kubeconfig file. So we should go to the cluster management where the cluster instances are present. We check on this so that we can download the kubeconfig file for future purpose. Next, we are going to see how to set up the Jenkins on AWS EC2 instance. We will create another instance for configuring Jenkins. This is a powerful tool which is an automation server used for continuous integration and continuous delivery. We will demonstrate it further. First thing is, we should have AWS account, access to EC2 service, and we should have a basic understanding of Linux commands. So for this, we have to create another EC2 instance. We follow the same procedure that we followed for the other two instances, master and kube worker. So once you do every step, like creating an instance and allocating the IP address to it and setting up the security group by adding the port 8080 and all, and then we connect to the instance. Java should be installed on the instance Jenkins in order to install Jenkins. First command we give is like updating the packages and then installing Java. And the next command is to import Jenkins repository JPG keys and add the repository. And then we install Jenkins. We again update the packages and go with installing Jenkins using this command sudo apt install Jenkins. Once it is installed, it is going to give an output like this. Then we can start Jenkins. So to start it, we give the command sudo systemctl enable Jenkins and we start the Jenkins. After we add Jenkins or start Jenkins, we should allow traffic on Jenkins on port 8080. For that, we execute this command. So once we allow the traffic, we can access the Jenkins from this link. This is the elastic IP of the Jenkins EC2 instance colon 8080, the port that we allowed earlier. So initially, while setting up the Jenkins UI, we initially start with the initial admin password. For that, we can give we can actually view the file named initial admin password inside secrets folder. It will display the password. We can save that for later use. So on the same Jenkins EC2 instance, we should run the command relating to kubectl tool. This is the tool that is used to talk with Kubernetes clusters. So we should keep this tool installed on Jenkins EC2 instance. So the command we used is like, first we should execute this command and then execute kubectl command to install kubectl tool on EC2 instance of Jenkins. And the fourth step is to configure the kube config file on Jenkins. So we do this step to integrate or to configure Jenkins with Kubernetes. So that's the reason why earlier we have downloaded the config file of cluster. So we should execute a command called sudo su jenkins to enter the home directory of Jenkins. Then we should go to the root directory, check the path. We should change the directory to var lib Jenkins. Inside that, we should create a directory called .cube and then create a file called config. We used the vi editor to actually edit the config file. So copy paste the config file that was downloaded earlier from Rancher, copy the content of it and paste it here and save it with the escape :wq to exit from the vi editor. Then the file is saved, the config file is saved, so that it will configure Jenkins with Kubernetes. Now verify the Kubernetes configuration. Ensure Jenkins can communicate with your Kubernetes cluster. To ensure that, we execute this command kubectl config current context. So current context is nothing but the cluster name. If we fetch the cluster name, we can ensure that Jenkins is communicating with Kubernetes cluster. So the final step of Jenkins setup is like, we should install the necessary plugins. So previously we had the initial admin password. When we get the Jenkins UI initially, it will ask for the admin password. So once we give that, it will ask us to install certain plugins. So if we install the plugins, then we can create our username and passwords, and we can provide our email address. Once you give all the details, you can save and continue. Then it will install all the plugins required. Then we will get the starting page of Jenkins. Then when you start as a new user, This is the UI that we will see without any jobs or pipelines created. So here comes the step where we allow Jenkins to build Docker images. In order to do that, we will install Docker on EC2 instance of Jenkins by giving these commands. Then uh, we give the permission to docker.sock file that will talk to Docker daemon. Means basically Docker, we allow Docker to talk to or communicate with the Docker daemon by giving permissions to this file. So after doing this step, here we should note that sometimes Jenkins will stop automatically where we cannot see the UI until we start it. So just make a note, like once we connect to EC2 instance of Jenkins from AWS console, we should give a command called sudo systemctl start Jenkins to enable and start the Jenkins. After few minutes, you can actually open this link to access the UI for Jenkins. So previously, for the first user, when we set up the admin password and all, for the next login, it will directly take you to the login page. So we can give our credentials here and login. So after we set up Jenkins, we will come to GitHub repository, wherein we push all our source code, Docker file and var file to GitHub repository. For this, we have created an account on GitHub using GitHub link. So this is the repository that we have created. We create a repo using create new repository, where we have given the name and all, and created the repository and added files. To add files, we gather all the files that are required, like source code, Docker file and the var file that we have. We have to clone the repository locally, so we open a terminal, navigate to the directory where we have the files on our local system, and then clone. I took this URL from here. Should just copy this and clone it. And then we should add we should start adding files and folders by this command. Then we should commit the changes, the initial changes, and we should push the changes or the files to branch master. So once we push all the files to master branch, we should just go to the GitHub repository page and refresh it, so that we can see all the files that are uploaded. So here comes the final step, creating and running the CI/CD pipeline in Jenkins. So the prerequisites are like Jenkins install and running on AWS EC2 instance. We have Jenkins running on EC2 instance named Jenkins 645. So steps to create CI/CD pipeline. We should access the dashboard using this URL that we have here. Should just log in. So after logging in, we can go to manage Jenkins and select on manage credentials. Here we are going to add two credentials, one for Docker and another one for GitHub repository. So first we'll go forward with Docker Hub credentials. We should click on add credentials and enter every detail of Docker, like we should select username with password. We should leave this as is, but here we should give our Docker username and Docker's password, and the ID. We can give any name here, and click on create. Once we create, it will display the credentials created under this path. We should do the same thing for GitHub credentials. In place of username and password, we should give GitHub username and password and create another entry for credentials. Then to create a new pipeline, we should click on new item. It will take us to this page where we can give our name and select pipeline. So we have given a name called SWE 645 assignment 2 as a name and selected pipeline. Then we should check the GitHub project box and paste the URL from GitHub repository. So the next step is like we should select this checkbox and then give the URL. And then it will take us to set up poll SCCM and we should give 5 stars. So under build triggers, check poll SCM and give entry as stars with spaces. So we give these stars in such a manner that the first star represents the minute, the second one represents the hour, third one represents the day of the month, and the fourth one represents the month, the fifth one represents the day of the week. So basically by using these, Jenkins is set to poll the repository every minute at the beginning of each minute. Then we go down and select definition as pipeline script from SCM and select Git from here and provide the same URL from GitHub repository and give the credentials. As we have created credentials earlier, we just have to select the GitHub credentials under the drop down, and then we should make sure this is selected as master because we have pushed all the files to master branch. So after this, leave this as is and then click on save. The third step is to commit the Jenkins files. We should actually create and commit Jenkins files on GitHub repository. So we have to go to the web interface of GitHub and create a new file called Jenkins file, and then use this script. This script is used to automate the CI/CD process. So the fourth step is to run the pipeline. As we have set the automatic script that will automate the CI/CD process. So whenever we make any changes to our files, the source files inside the web app folder of ours, then it will trigger the pipeline on Jenkins and automatically apply the changes without any manual work. So we'll demonstrate that now. So here this is our landing page. So we are going to demonstrate by changing the background color of this page. So we should go to GitHub repo, go to index.html, edit it and change the color. We have changed it to different color now and committing the changes and commit changes. Once you commit that, go back to Jenkins UI, the pipeline UI, and then commit. Whenever you commit, the CI/CD pipeline will start the process of building the changes. Wait until the build completes. Once it is complete, go to that build and click on console output to see the logs. Here it displays the success message. Now come to this page and just refresh. you can see the background color changing. So we had made changes to index.html, the background, by changing the background color, and we have seen it changing literally, which the build was done automatically by the pipeline created on Jenkins.